Alright, shalom to the Israelite community. Alright, Israelites. I just been dealing with some Israelites, man, that is, they go by the title African American blacks. Why do our people accept titles that's been given to us? Why do our people hate? They hate to come into their Israelite heritage. They hate to come into their Israelite heritage, and they prefer being Negroes, blacks, African Americans, and titles that our slave owners, children, and slave owners put on us. And man, that they just settle for that, man. And it's like, being an Israelite is a job. Man, it's a job, man. You got to get up, you got to fight, you got to study. You know what I'm saying? You got to study. Man, you got to fight. And you going up against the whole system. You see, the black, the Negro, they didn't accept it that the other folks that are not Israelites are Israelites. And they just accept, whatever given to them. But if you're an Israelite, you got to get up and fight, and you going against the whole system, and you just not going to take everything, that the slavery descendants, children give us. Israelite man gonna stand up and he gonna look into things, and he gonna try to understand really what's going on. But a so-called black, African American, man, they just accept everything that the slave owners, descendants give them. If it ain't a whip on their back, they'll protest, and they want to get in the system, and they want to make it in the system. But an Israelite, he wants segregation, he wants separation, he wants his own land, and we want everything for ourselves, and we want justice. We want our own army. We want our own judges. We want our own doctors. We want everything. And we ain't necessarily got to share everything. But a Negro, a black, and the African American, the Israelites that had accepted the slave owners' children's descendant titles that done bestowed upon them, man, they go for everything, man, and it's just pitiful, man, because they really ain't got no fight in them. Yeah, they'll fight to get in the system and do the same thing that the slave owners' children's doing, but they don't want to do no better than that. They don't want sovereignty. They don't want their own land. They don't want to be free from this system. They don't want to see this system destroyed. And how did they prefer to get along, in a sense, and me, I advocate getting along with those that can help our heritage and that can help us get free. But, the slave owners' children, they don't want to see us as Israelites. That's like nobody told us that we are Israelites. The slave owner children ain't told you to worship Yah. They ain't told you that you were Israelite. They ain't told the Israelites none of this. We had to find out on our own. But the African American, the Negro, and the black, that the slave owners then told them who they are. They told them that they were saved from Africa, and they was enslaved for the betterment of their good, and they've been brung to America, and this is their home. And they didn't accepted that. But the Israelite, he ain't accepted none of that. He ain't accepted none of that. And he ain't trying to help the slave owners' descendants in no kind of way. In no kind of way. We ain't trying to help them stay in control of us. That's like me. I went to the promised land and I knocked on all the doors. All the government doors, trying to get in and tell them folks, we the Israelites and we want to come home and we need freedom. Me, a Negro or an African American, he not gonna do that. He not gonna challenge the system. He'll protest and he'll whine and moan about something, but he ain't finna really try to make no real changes that's gonna matter and mean something. He's not gonna do it. They're not gonna do it, and they ain't gonna really support no real struggle. That they'll support something mediocre, you know, but they not finna support no real change. Like, we trying to get our own country. We trying to get our own army. We trying to have our own doctors. We want separation. You know, we want to live by ourselves. It's how Hebrew Israelite is. And then, like I say, the slave owners' descendants, they didn't tell us we Israelites. We had to find this out about ourselves. And then when we found out, man, it's been a job ever since. Being an Israelite is a job. Being a Negro or African American in the titles that they done put on us, that's kind of like slavery in a sense, because they giving you everything. They done gave you a history. They done gave you holidays. They say what you can do and basically what you can't do. And then if you a Negro or African American, you support your captivity. You support your captivity and you help your oppressors keep your people locked down by helping them and participating in the system, in the laws that they set up. But an Israelite, we want real change. We don't want to help our oppressor. We not finna go to the army, man, and fight for them to keep us locked down and to keep us in bondage. Not an Israelite that know truth. And the Israelite that know truth, man, he gonna study, he gonna pray to Almighty Yah. We don't even have the same so-called God that the slave owners gave the slave descendants. You know, they gave them a demigod. Whereas the Israelites that's woke, we got the father, the boss, the one that's in charge. You know, being an African American or a Negro is like next to slavery. You know, they done turned slavery traditions into a badge of honor, whereas us Israelites look at slavery as punishment, something terrible, bad. You know, that's like being called black means death, destruction. Man, go look at Webster's dictionary. It means death, destruction, no good, untrustworthy. You know, and Israelites, you know, go by them titles. You know, the ones that don't know the truth of who they are or who done accepted the titles African American, black, Negro. Those are titles that our slavery owners' descendants put on. Not one time have we got together and said, this is who we are. This is where we come from. The Negro, black, and the African American, and accepted all the traditions intellectually that the slave owner descendants put on them. You know, that they not trying to make change, and that they happy walking around talking about we Negroes, we blacks, and we African Americans. And that's control. They control your history. They control your destiny. They control everything. But an Israelite, it's a job to make change. You're going to challenge the system. You're going to say that them folks who claiming the Israelite heritage that don't look like us are not Israelites. And we're not going to accept them as Israelites, you know, because they're not. They didn't go through no curses. They ain't been through none of the troubles that Prophet Moses would say that would be on the Israelites when the covenant was broken. That's like the Negro, the black, and the African American. He don't know that we are the Israelites that broke the covenant, that ran into Africa to do their religion, doing what's called the Babylonian Wars. You know, a black, a Negro, think that they're all represent all the Africans in Africa, and that they was just captured and enslaved, and now that they over here in America, that they good, and that they don't have to make real change, you know, but they can make change in the system, but they not trying to have sovereignty. You know, that's wrong, man. You got to wake up. You got to wake up to your real Israelite heritage. It's a job. It's a job. Man, you're going to be up all day, all night trying to find a way to get your people free for real and wake your people up. Man, you know, being a Hebrew Israelite, man, you know that's like you got relatives. Man, your relatives, this Negro, blacks, and African Americans, they gonna kind of like shun you, and they not gonna really, embrace you and embrace the real change. Because like I said, it's a job and it's a challenge. It's like being on the plantation, how the slaves was. Some want to escape and the majority didn't. That's how it is with our people, man. We got to wake up to our Israelite heritage. It's our only salvation. It's something that the slave owner descendants can't control, and there's no way for them to control it. They can't control it. They can't control what we believe in. They can't control what we worship. They can't control what we desire. They can't tell us that we don't need sovereignty. But a Negro, African American, they could tell you that you don't need sovereignty because they got you fighting in a system that's keeping you in captivity. You're not really trying to make no change. When you go serve in the government, in the military, in the army, in the police, you fighting for the laws that our slavery owner descendants then created. You Negroes can vote on them, but your vote don't mean anything. Your vote don't mean anything, and that you are content with, with what the slave owner descendants then gave you. But an Israelite, you're going to stand up and you're not going to accept none of the stuff that they trying to put on us. None of it. We don't really want the slavery food. We don't want the slavery food. We hate pork chops and we hate chitlins and we hate all that stuff. We don't want to do with none of that stuff that got to do with slavery and how we try to go by the eating laws that Prophet Moses gave us. Whereas the Negro, the African American, and black, he think the slavery traditions that was passed down, it is a badge of honor. Us Israelites, we don't think that. So, you Negroes and you blacks and you African Americans, they got destruction waiting for y'all. As soon as this country get in some troubles, they finna put y'all on the front line. But a Israelite, he ain't finna go for none of that. We'll sit back and watch this country burn. We'll sit back and watch it burn. And then how we not trying to help our slave owners. We not trying to help the slave owners' descendants in no kind of way. But a Negro, African American, and a black is, because that's what he was taught to do. That's what he was taught to do. Our history is in this book right here. This book right here, this is our history. And this is what you should try to be like. This is what you should try to get the understanding of. This is what sets you free. Message from the Israelite Brotherhood. It's time to stand up and quit being Negroes, blacks, and African Americans, because those are the titles that our slavery owners, children, and them created for us. Not one time did we create them names. You can't find nowhere in history that we created them names, and that is something that they put on us. But they didn't tell us to be Hebrew Israelites. They didn't tell us to be Hebrew Israelites. We woke up to that by the grace of Almighty Yah, and that's something that they can't take from us. But they can take you Negroes, black, African Americans identity. They change it all the time, from nigger to Negro to black to Afro American to colored, all kind of names. But an Israelite, we ain't accepting none of them titles, and we look at all so-called African Americans as Israelites. If you part of the transatlantic slave trade, you're an Israelite, because you going through the curses that Prophet Moses say will be on the Israelites that broke the covenant in the book of Jeremiah. We went into Africa doing what's called the Babylonian Wars. It's time to wake up, because being a Negro and being an African American ain't no real struggle in you. The real struggle is trying to get your heritage back as an Israelite. It's a job. It's a real job. Message from the Israelite Brotherhood.